Begin Self-Publishing, episode number 72. Author Events with Alison Morton.
Interested in self-publishing but don't know where to start? Want to get your book onto Amazon? Want to hold your paperback book in your hands? Learn how on the Begin Self-Publishing podcast with your host, Tim Lewis.
I met Alison Morton first at the Triskelly Book Festival. I had actually talked to her quite considerably on Twitter, but never met her in person before. I was introduced to her by Debbie Young, a former guest of the show, who said, "I think Alison would be perfect for the show," without really giving any idea about what topic she'd be perfect for. So I sort of mumbled and said, yes, perhaps I'll have her on the show, without really knowing whether I would or not. So after meeting her at the Triskelly Book Festival, I had a look at her website, and one of the first things that jumped out to me was the sheer number of author events she's speaking at. Most people have one or two, but she's got probably about 20 or 30 events, all lined up in a nice history. So I was thinking, who better to talk to about speaking at author events than Alison Morton? So now over to the interview. Hello, Alison, and welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Tim. I'm delighted to be here.
One of the reasons I got you on the show is because of your quite large amount of experience in terms of author speaking. How did you first get your first speaking engagement as an author?
I don't know if you count my launch. I had to do quite a lot of approaching to Waterstones because that was in 2013. And they were sort of semi-enthusiastic, semi-wary at indie authors. So that was me being very businesslike. I'd run a company before I started writing books. So I had my business card and my advanced information sheet. And I said I can guarantee this footfall and I would underwrite any costs and blah, blah, blah. So that was very much me, the submissive, one trying to ask them for a favour because they were doing me a favour. If you want to talk about my very first speaking at a conference as a grown-up, if you like, in the book world, I approached the conference organiser at the Romantic Novelists Association conference. I'd been a member for 4 years, and I said, well, would you like something a little different? And I did a talk on writing in an alternative environment, which sort of broadened it out a little bit from my core area of alternate history. And it took in trying to think not so much out of the box, but imagining that there was no box there, exploring other things out of their comfort zone, the reality they normally wrote in. And I had to make the running. But I did know the conference organizer through membership of the organization. So if you belong to an organization, it's a good idea to make friends with the power behind the event.
Clearly, I don't think your books can be described as romance, can they? So you had to go for something that was a bit different.
Yeah, there's a core of emotional relationship, which is very up and down over the first trilogy. It's very much contained with the story. It's interwoven into the story. But yeah, they're more adventure stories. But I don't think books without an emotional relationship of some kind I don't think they have enough punch in them. And I wanted to have my heroine have emotional problems along with her cultural problems, with her story, with the danger. So to me, it's an interwoven part. And if you've got a boy and a girl, or boy and a boy, or whatever, a girl and a girl, who are going through that emotional tangle, you've got a romance.
Yeah, I think it's very hard to write a good book that hasn't got at least some element of romance in it somewhere.
Yeah.
So going back to you approached people. You didn't just basically wait for people to approach you in terms of getting these speaking gigs, did you? You seem to have like almost a systematic plan for approaching people and asking them for if you could speak.
Well, I think for all authors, and especially indies, our big problems are visibility and discoverability. I'm not telling your listeners anything they don't know about that. So one of the ways is to make yourself into a figure that people instantly recognise. Oh, I know you. You're that girl that does the books with the eagle on the front. That's a result, basically. So, yeah, for quite a while, and still now, I do the approaching, if you like. You started me off looking back at all my events, and the first one I was actually asked to take part in was the Historical Novel Society conference in Denver last year. I chaired the panel on the brass tacks of self-publishing, and I was actually asked to do that. But I still do ask at other things. Let's have a little think. When I went back to the Romantic Novelists Association this year and said, oh, I'd like to talk about something, they said, oh, what do you want to talk on? And I said, right, I'll do historical research. So now I've got that relationship. I can sort of drop in. They know I'm a reasonable speaker. But I think it's convincing the organisers that you can do it and making those networking contacts. So, yeah, I'm still in the part ask, part get asked. And I think it's something you do when you become more, quotes, famous. I think you then get asked.
Yeah, but you're at the point where you can ask and there's a good probability that they'll say yes.
Now, but that's taken a lot of work. I mean, when you run a business, I know the huge value of networking. Talking to, you cannot just write in and say, oh, I'm so-and-so, I'd like to talk on X. They want you to be there, see the event, mix a bit. It's good, just good networking practice. I think the other thing was I had written articles in magazines. I did some stuff in Writing Magazine. I did an article called Rewriting History, which unsurprisingly was about alternative history. And I also did a thing about serious business, which was basically about recognition as a self-published author. Now, they gave me a little bit of credibility and a sort of something I could put on the CV when I was approaching. So you have to build your persona up a bit so that you've got something behind you. And I think writing articles, whether for blogs or magazines, just gives you a bit of branding, a bit of clout, if you like, when you then approach an event organizer.
Yeah, so I don't mean to, and you don't have to answer this question, I can edit it out, but have you been paid for any of these speaking gigs that you have been invited for?
Yes. Do you want me to name names?
You don't have to. It's like, this is all recorded, so I can edit out things if you suddenly change your mind later.
Some have actually paid a fee, out of which, like the romantic novelists always pay a fee. You can set that against the conference cost. Some give you a free conference pass. Some pay your travel. Some pay your hotel and a portion of travel and give you free food, which is always appreciated. It's very much a mixed bag, if you like. At the recent Triskeal Lit Fest, I was given a fee. Obviously, I had to find my own accommodation. At other ones, I'm giving a Chip Lit Fest. I did a Trade Secrets Day. I was given a flat fee, and I had to find my expenses. Other ones here, Cherbourg in France, I'm given accommodation, food, and mileage, but no fee. But hey, I'm in the program with Kate Moss, you know. So it very much varies. I do think I need travel expenses and food at least.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're being paid something, though, I suppose. It doesn't really matter what it's attributed to. But
you have to do a lot of free stuff, I think, first. Like it or lump it.
Yeah.
But I think never hesitate to ask for travel. But if you're at the beginning stage, you're making all the running, I'm afraid you're probably going to have to pay up for everything.
Yeah. I think there's been some controversy about various literary conferences not paying people. But if you can get as a fairly new speaker, I suppose, if you can get into one of them, then that's worth something. But so in terms of like making connections with people. Do you think it's worthwhile making connection with other authors in the hope that they'll sort of mention you if they've got speaking gigs to the organisers?
Well, I got the Chip Lit Fest one through a friend of mine in the RNA, and she told the conference organiser, oh yes, I know somebody who could do that. So that was quite nice. Yes, and having talked to the Triskel collective, if you like, I was invited because I knew them and they knew me and my books. I think you must really sort of consider every connection. If somebody has heard you speak at one event, they may say, oh yeah, actually so-and-so was quite good at that, or so-and-so represented that interest or gave that talk. It's a bit snowbally, the more you do, the more there is, but definitely connect with other authors because they are your strength.
If we go from sort of the pleasant end of the spectrum where you're getting paid and it's a nice plushy venue, what's the most difficult event that you've ever spoken at, and what did you learn from that?
Oh dear. Well, difficult. This is more in the sense of disappointment. Was it last year? Yeah, when I was launching Aurelia, which is book 4 in the whole series, but the first of a new trilogy, because there's one trilogy and a second trilogy. So I wanted to make a bit of a push on this one because it was starting a new character's story. And I wrote to loads and loads of bookshops and said I'd like to come and do a gig, and this is my background and this is what I've done. And I hadn't done quite as much, but I had a bit behind me. And some I didn't get an answer from. Some said, no, we've got a full program. Some said, we don't do self-published authors. Cringe. Some just sort of said, oh, well, you have to contact so-and-so who's the events manager, and they're on holiday at the moment, and inevitably they don't come back to you. Anyway, whatever. So I did get 2 gigs on that little tour, and also I went and saw my brother who lived in the area, which was quite nice. So I did 2. One was a small indie shop, and the other was a branch of a national. I'm not going to name names. And another author was good doing it with me, and we thought, oh, that would be quite good. The 2 of us, we both write. She writes steampunk. We wrote alternative-ish environments, so that was quite a nice sparking off. So we had quite a lot to offer, and she'd had a feature in the Independent newspaper, so that was quite nice. So she had a bit of clout behind her. And we fixed it up, and we went to the National Chain Bookshop, and I'd done a lot of emailing out and a lot of publicity, PR over quite a while. But the bookshop wasn't exactly pushing it. And we only got onto their events schedule about 3 weeks before the event. Anyway, we did lots of pushing. We did leaflets in the air. We did a whole lot of stuff. And my publisher, Silverwood, publishing services company, Silverwood, some of them came, and some of my friends from the Alliance, and about 6 to 8 people turned up. And this should have been an event with 50 people. I was quite cheesed off about that because I don't think the bookshop did very much. And that was really disappointing. This was the first event, so that for me was really difficult. But the thing is, you've just got to say, well, these people have made the effort, so let's get talking. So we did the same talk or the same conversation that we would have done to 50, 100 people. But it was extremely disappointing that despite all the hard work, we hadn't got a bigger audience. But we made the best of it. You just have to get on with it. And I think even if one person turns up, you have to talk to them. So that was the worst. We went on to the indie shop, which I thought, oh, that's a bit small. It was the most fabulous evening, and it was packed. So there you are. And they were just fantastic there. Same kind of level of PR. So I've never actually been heckled, if you want bad ones. I've had good questions, challenging questions at the launches as well. But I've never been heckled. So I think as long as there's no fights or blood or anything like that, you should count it as a good successful event.
Yeah, I think unless you write some sort of controversial political fiction or something, then I'm not sure you would get heckled at an author event. I'm sure it probably does happen in some cases. I mean, have you ever heard of anybody being heckled at an author event?
I've seen it. And I won't repeat the remark here, but I think it was somebody who was probably a little bit challenged in their life, I think, or had perhaps been to the pub before or something, and she dealt with it fantastically.
Yeah, I mean, usually things don't come out well for hecklers in these
No,
situations.
No. So usually people have turned up, they've made the effort to come out, they've booked the event, they've paid their £3 or nothing or whatever it is. They want to hear you. And we've all been to events where there's been authors and we've had our glass of wine, we've sat down and listened and blah, blah, blah. We've come out and we've made a special effort. So when people attend your talk, they've done you that compliment of actually thinking, yeah, I want to hear this person. So even if it's 2, 3, 50, 100, you're there, you're on, you've got to perform and do your stuff. So I think the thing is not to get despondent. If somebody heckles or asks a daft question, deal with it.
So in terms of like finding potential venues to write to, are you just looking up basically lists of bookstores in particular areas, or how do you approach finding out who to write to and be rejected by or accepted by?
Well, that one I did because I'm from the southeast, as you probably can hear, and I wanted to try a different geographical area. So I went with the southwest, and Silverwood Books are based in Bristol, so and my brother lives just across the border in Wales. So I thought, right, I'll go and stay with him and we can target some of them in that area. And then I just got onto, was it Google or the telephone directory? No, the Booksellers Association members in the area, and just wrote to them, basically, or emailed them all. I tried to find out who the events manager was by looking at the websites and so on, and then I emailed them all. And it's just plain sort of marketing approach, if you like. It's like when you're looking for book reviews, you go online, see who the people are that have reviewed books like yours, and then I'm afraid it's slog sending the emails out.
Yeah, I mean that's a case where more work does generally lead to more results, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's very true. I mean with the conferences, hopefully you've been to at least one and seen what they're like and identified those people, because there's usually a drinks evening or dinner, and you can usually somebody who can at least introduce you to them. You're not going to pitch there, but you're just going to say, oh, hi, really like the conference, fantastic program, may I contact you afterwards about it? And that's all you're going to do at that meeting, but you've made the initial contact.
Yeah, your main thing is just to be remembered, really, rather than trying to rush into shoving your book in their hand.
No, absolutely not.
So, more generally, what advice would you give to people who are nervous about speaking at an author event? Maybe they've never done one before.
I mean, it is massive. It's a massive thing to do. I mean, I've done a lot of speaking in a previous career. I've spoken to a hall of thousands, literally, and I've done teaching little work groups and seminars and stuff. Whether I'm any good at it, I don't know, but I used to get invited back. So I've got over that barrier. But for authors who generally sit down in front of their computer or with a notebook and write in a very solitary profession where they're the only person in their office, whether it's a proper office or the dining room table, it's extremely difficult to stand up and talk about something that's a very personal thing. I mean, a lot of us, certainly our first books are our babies, and we think nobody will be interested. Nobody's going to want to hear me bore on about this. Nobody really wants to know, and what have I got to say anyway? And those are the sort of things that immediately occur. So I would recommend you sit down and just get a bit of scribble paper and say what you think your book is about and what would you be interested in if you weren't the author? How would you know, oh, that's quite interesting, that's about Rome. Oh, it's not Rome, right, okay, it's about Rome that survived. Oh, that's like Fatherland. Oh, right, okay. And pretend you're somebody that has booked to go to that talk. What would you want to know? So that gives you a bit of a clue what you might talk about. The next thing, it sounds a bit daring. Dare to book it. Just book it. Because then you've got to do it. Because you've committed. And you've then got to make the effort. It's like a lot of people say, oh, I could write a book, but I haven't got time. If they really wanted to write a book, they have got time. If they had a deadline, they'd have to do it. So dare to book that talk. Start being very concrete about it. Agree the topic and the scope of the talk. Don't go for the 1,000. Go for, say, 15 or 20 at quite a low-key event. Somewhere that's perhaps in your town that just wants some I wouldn't go for the Women's Institute to start with. They're very tough. But just like a little group who's looking for speakers, even if it's the school PTA or a little low-key, or the church group or something, because you can practice on them, and they really aren't as important as doing a big launch somewhere. Write it all out. Get your ideas together, write it all out. You will not be reading from your script at the event. You'll be talking, but it helps get your thoughts together. And also, this will instill confidence in you, because you'll find you know a great deal more than you think you knew. So you're doing all this in your head, and you're realizing that you actually do know a lot. And as we know, knowledge is power, as they say. So that's the next thing. When you've written it all out, walk about, obviously in the privacy of somewhere that nobody can see you, and speak it all aloud. So you get used to hearing your voice. As I said, you're not going to read that, but you're going to get used to hearing your voice. You're going to be standing. You're not going to be sitting. You're going to be standing, because you breathe better when you're standing. And if, like me, you like to walk around a little bit, that's quite good for your breathing, because it gets your blood flow up to your head. So you practice, and then practice again a couple of days later, and you'll suddenly find it will flow a little easier. So you're sort of reassuring yourself. If you are confident with it, and not unless, do a few slides. The PowerPoint's the one everybody knows. Something or equivalent. And don't overdo it. And it's better just to put 3 or 4 pictures up on the wall and then talk round them. We've all been in business meetings where the PowerPoint slide is jammed with 20 lines of tiny print. Nobody's interested. You put a picture of you which I often use, is a small child on a huge Roman mosaic, and then I talk to that picture. And that, you know, that was you. You can talk about that experience, and people want to hear that kind of story. So try and hook onto things that you know about and you're confident about. But don't depend on them, because if it all goes fat on the day and the projector doesn't work or the electricity is off or something, don't be dependent on it. And very importantly, remember to breathe. This is what walking around with your script in the early stage is quite useful for, because you learn when you can breathe, and you learn, your body forces you to breathe. And if you get stuck, just take a breath. I don't know if any of these are going to help. They're very sort of practical, down-to-earth things. But always remember, they are there. They've made the effort, or they've paid to come and see you. That gives you quite a bit of power, a bit of confidence in that they've actually come to see you, so they must be interested in you. I don't know if any of that helps.
No, it's quite useful. I mean, I've heard variants of that advice on various other podcasts, and even from like these sort of world-renowned international speakers saying much the same thing about slides.
Yeah.
I think that people end up with this they're almost writing their notes on their slides. And it's always a nightmare because people at the back usually can't see a lot of the stuff. So a big picture of you or some other image that you can talk about is probably better. And I think rather than trying to remember your speech by writing it all on the slides, you're probably better to just have those big images. I mean, do you, in terms of like these events, how much earlier do you arrive before they start? I mean, how much preparation do you actually do on the day when you're there?
Well, let's have a little think about that. I quite like getting there the day before.
You're not camping out at the place, are you?
No, but I mean, I sort of will, because I live in France, and most of my events, some of things are here, but a lot of my events are in the UK, so I will get a flight and get to the hotel the night before, because I don't want any flights on the day, because that's just fraught. So I think if you're driving to the place, great. Make sure you arrive, I would say, an hour before. Go and have a cup of coffee if you're early. Take the train that's going to get you there an hour before. You can have a quick whip through your notes, which you are not going to use at the event. You can have little cards with bullet points. You're allowed that. I do that. Especially if it's a workshop and you're teaching and you will need to remember all the facts. Go and have a cup of coffee, whatever. The other thing is vital to make sure you've got the organiser's mobile phone and they've got your number as well. Make sure you swap numbers well ahead because things do go wrong. And I would arrive at the venue 20 minutes, half an hour before. Because at least, I mean, if you're at a conference, you're there anyway and you're taking part and going to talks. If you're just going for an event, a separate thing, and you're just sort of turning up and talking, I think 20 minutes, half an hour actually at the venue, because sometimes the organisers are running around doing stuff and they don't want you in their hair. If it's something where you're doing a book launch, then you need a much more time, because I would say about an hour, if possible, if they don't mind, because you've got to put your roller banner up, you've got to set the glasses out for the drinks, get that sorted. You've recruited somebody to open drinks, you must do that. Somebody else to take money if it's not a bookshop. You've got to get all those people sorted, and inevitably some of the audience will arrive early. I've never yet done a launch where they haven't arrived early. And so you've got to be ready for that. And I would say you've got to be all set up, if you're doing a launch, at least 15 minutes before the official time. So that does need, if you're organising the whole banana, you've got to be at least an hour before. But if you're just rolling up, 20 minutes, I would say, 20 minutes, 30 minutes.
So that's just about covered everything I can think of about author events at the moment. How can people find out about you and your books?
Oh, me and my books, right. At a forthcoming author event. Actually, I'm over in Bristol. I'm going over there this weekend for on a panel on researching historical fiction, so that's quite interesting. Me and my books, we lurk at www.alison, that's ALISON, -Morton, MORTON.com. So that's where the books and stuff are. I also have a writing blog, which I just put fun stuff and have guests. That is a direct link from the other one. I'm on Facebook as Alison Morton Author, and I tweet rather a lot at Alison_Morton. Somebody else got my name before me.
Yes, tell me about
Yeah, it's quite annoying that. So those are my principal social media, if you like. But I do put my events up on my website. And if anybody has any questions or wants to approach me to speak, I'm always open to that. But I think the thing is, do a few, get some confidence, always have somebody to take photographs, because then you can use it on your blogs and Facebook, and persist. It's like anything, you have to work up from the very beginning, the very low key. And I would say I'm sort of a third to halfway up the food chain. I mean, I would love to be there at the London Book Fair giving a talk. I mean, the height of anybody's realisation, but I'm not quite there yet.
Well, I mean, usually when I've been at the London Book Fair, that the authors are crammed in some little corner at the back of. So, yeah, I'm not sure how wonderful talking at the London Book Fair would be.
If you get to talk at the Author Centre, that's quite nice.
Yeah, well, certainly from a CV point of view, I suppose you can say,
yeah,
as seen at the London Book Fair. Yeah, I mean, I think it's all, with all of these things, I think connections are important, but you do need to put the work in. So.
You need to put the work in, yeah.
I've not been great at the work point of view. Connections, yes, but work, yeah, probably not.
I think you need, I mean, I think it helps if you are a bit of an outgoing person, but I think, say, even if it's just a small group, or just a short talk, or you're on a panel, anything, you should really sort of make an effort and try and do it, because it's part of the visibility thing and discoverability thing that all self-published authors face. And I think once you've done one or two, it gets a little bit easier.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show today, Alison.
Well, it's been a total pleasure. It's lovely having a chat with you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please stop by iTunes and rate and leave a review. This helps make the show more visible. For free resources, show notes, and other helpful content, join the community at beginselfpublishing.com.